determination of what happens afterwards when the movie is over. That is the success and that is the victory of surrealism.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Now there's this other end. If you also watch Nollywood movies, uh,
Yeah.
there are hardly subtext in dialogues. There are
Mm.
hardly imagery in dialogues, except for Peter Edochie, who comes up with a lot of beautiful proverbs, and you begin to
Mm.
have a feel of what he's talking about in terms of imagery. I mean,
Mm.
can you then let the lay artist or the lay filmmaker understand what subtext is all about and the subterranean messages and the subtext,
Yeah.
the film to make them, what they are, hit films.
Yeah. Okay. It's simple. I won't even just restrict it to film. Uh, Let me use this conversation we're having now. Let's even keep it live. So you're asking me questions, and every time you ask a question, I answer. But you ask me certain questions, and I look this way, and then I do this. It tells you that that answer, that question has prompted me to a part of my subconscious where I'm beginning to seek answers to your question from a perspective or a reservoir that is not just as direct as all the other questions you've asked me. So you ask me one question, I talk, yeah, 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 yeah. You ask me another question, okay, okay, okay. They ask me the third question, I go, actually, I think that every time you ask me another question, I go back the same way, then you go back to the same strain of questions, and I go back to the same expression, and you can see even through my gestures and the look in my eye that I've gone to another space in order to find the answer to the question. That's what the subtext is.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Now,
Mm.
you've mentioned light and sound in your
Yeah.
scene construction or scene
Mm.
design. Nigerians may not really have embraced the essential making sound and the music tracking in movies. What advice would you give? I mean, you hear some sounds in our movies, they don't
Mm.
interpret the pictures you see.
Mm.
What is your say?
Okay, that's sound design. Fortunately, I'm also a sound designer. I do a lot of things.
Okay.
And when people ask me, I say it's not because I want to, it's just the curve upon which my career started as a filmmaker. I was coming from a background of an artist. I ended up teaching myself how to do animation. I was working somewhere back then. I spent 1 year after closing from work at 11 p.m. I'll be awake till like 4 a.m. learning 3D Studio Max as far back as 2001. And after 1 year, I could animate, so I resigned, and that's how my career as an independent producer started. And one thing I know is that at the end of the day, it's um, it's you see the thing about sound design. Sound design is, even though I'm not primarily a sound designer, when you introduce me, that's not the first thing you say. But I'll boldly say that sound design is the single most important thing in a film, beyond even the beautiful pictures, beautiful lights, and everything. Because
Compared to the low lighting that you're talking about.
yeah, because let me explain. Because you could have a movie shot in the lowest resolution. Let's even say 320 by 280 pixels. That is really small, even on a mobile phone. That's crap these days. But it has good sound design, good music score, and nice audio in terms of dialogue. Then you see another movie shot 6K resolution. Crystal clear. In fact, if you went too close to it, it will cut your skin because of how sharp the image is, but the sound is bad.
Oh
You
yeah.
will watch the 320 to 40 pixels movie and be more comfortable with it than this super high resolution movie. You understand? So that's how important sound is. So again, in terms of, it's not just about clarity of sound. What you've talked about now is about the design of the sound. So we're having this conversation now, and if this was a movie, for every question you've asked that has stirred up certain kind of emotions, both within me and anybody who's watching this, there has to be an accompanying sound design. There has to be a there has to be a scape, a soundscape that takes the viewer into that part of the story
Yeah.
and takes you to the emotion that is agitated for at that point in time, because storytelling is all about creating dynamic curves. So
Yes.
you are here, you want people to be happy, then you get here, you want them to be scared, then you want them to be sad and then angry. So the beauty of it is finding that balance where you don't keep them at one peak, at a peak of a curve for
Still,
too long.
yes.
So you have to make sure it's so dynamic, and before they get used to one emotion, you move them to the next one. So you are playing with their blood pressure, if you want me to put it that way. So sound design is the singular most important tool that makes that journey as fluid as it should be in a successful movie. You
Okay.
understand? And yeah, so it can never be overemphasized how important sound design. And again, good sound is not good sound design, just as good lighting is not good lighting design. If there isn't a design mindset behind it, then it is not lighting design and it's not sound design. It's just good lights and good sound.
Okay. Now, I mean, this is what we're saying about sound, story, imagery, and subtext and subterranean messages is about adding value to the movie
Yeah,
that you're producing. Now,
yeah.
would you mind telling us whether so far there is so much value addition in Nollywood movies in terms of culture, in terms of political economy, in terms of anything you can use like an artist to communicate what bothers you in your community?
Well, there's a lot of value addition. I won't dispute that. It might not be as elaborate and as many as would want it to be. It might not have been replicated by many filmmakers the way it ought to be, but it's there. It's there, and where you get to find out that these things are actually there in ample volume is when you attend film festivals. A lot of people, the entire experience they have of Nigerian films are just the movies they see in the cinemas, or the ones that end up on Netflix, or the ones on Iroko or Africa Magic. There's a crop of filmmakers. In fact, when you're talking about artistic filmmakers with very high artistry behind their films, the best place to see their works is always at film festivals. I can tell you that confidently because I run a film festival and I see these films every year. And they are mostly from very young and thirsty filmmakers who are just there to express themselves, who have not been polluted or adulterated by that thirst and that yearning for, oh, let's make money, but they are still expressing themselves in the purest form. And many of them are very successful surrealists in their own rights because they are thinking very deep and beyond the surface. So, again, yeah, it's there. People are doing it, but in mainstream Nigerian film industry, aka Nollywood, not a lot of people are embracing that. Not a lot of people are even embracing new actors in movies, not to talk about new techniques that are arty. A lot of people are focused more on the commercial aspect of it, which is understandable. For so many people, filmmaking is just a means of making money, it's just their livelihood. So they have no time thinking about being creative. But when you come from an art background, it's easy for you to create a balance because every artist always wants to create art.
But how much of what you just told us, how much of the arts in filmmaking can help develop the mainstream Nollywood? Because that is always my concern. People say they want to put food on the table. I keep asking, when are you going to make things that would actually help us develop our sense of intellectual culture when it comes to filmmaking, which is what happens in Europe, what happened in Europe far back in the 29 that we mentioned, David Lynch and the rest of
Mhm,
them.
mhm, mhm,
People who make short films actually influence mainstream filmmakers. They
mhm,
actually enrich mainstream. Also, what is wrong
mhm,
with Nollywood?
mhm. Well, I think if you look at history, there are a lot of movies that were outlawed or banned back in the day, even in Europe, because they felt they were not films that should be released to the mainstream viewers, mainstream public society. But today, we are seeing movies that match and surpass whatever was done in those movies everywhere. So, again, I think eventually there's going to be a paradigm shift. There are a lot of cultural connotations that go into the perception of people when they make those decisions about what they would rather see and what they would rather not see. When I create In fact, let me tell you this confidently. Why it was easy for me to put down my paintbrush to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to start making movies now, is because right after school, I did one exhibition, and it was a group exhibition with a couple of friends, and mostly, practically everyone else sold out their works, but mine were not sold out. Because a lot of people come and look at it, there's something creepy about this painting. Hi, are you sure this person is not possessed? So I knew, I knew, I knew right from time that I could not survive as a painter in this country at that point in time. But you see, as we speak now, it's been 3 years. I've been creating paintings for a solo exhibition that was meant to happen this year before the virus kicked in. I don't know if it's going to happen again, but again, I know I'm very confident that when that exhibition happens, the story would have changed. You see, the way that change has taken place with my painting and the kind of acceptance I'll get now when I paint surrealistic paintings and put out there in an exhibition and it gets sold out is the same way in a couple of years. The same story we have with the film now. Things are going to change because by then there would have been a paradigm shift and people's minds would have been more expanded about accepting new forms of art and new ways of expressing yourself as an artist and a filmmaker.
I suspect now that we're all confined to our homes. Some people might become
Yeah.
surrealistic.
Yeah, because again, you see that's it's called solipsism.
Yes.
Whenever you find yourself in an in a state of solipsism, especially one that you didn't bargain for, you are
Yes.
left with you, yourself, and you. So that means your body, your mind, your soul, your spirit, they all have the chance to come together and synergize to create thoughts and imaginations and new worlds that would never have been possible if you were distracted by the hustle of bustle of life and every other person who's around you. You get what I'm trying to say? So again, it's just naturally going to happen.
Like you said, your stories are surrealistic, and I've watched them. In fact, when I watched one, what is it? You watched Common Man Cinematography, or is it Poor
Mm.
Man's Common Man? I tried to, I tried to understand it. I couldn't. In fact, so the question now is, I mean, what influence would you likely be when it comes to story directions in the Nigerian movie industry? What influence would people like you likely have? You talk about young people thinking hard and thinking deep and expressing deep.
Mm.
What influence are this crop of filmmakers led by
Mm.
you be able to
Mm.
have on Nollywood in the next say couple of years?
Well, for me, I think it's in terms of first of all, I want to believe I have a unique visual style. I'm a visual storyteller. I'm not a dialogue driven storyteller. Again, is the fact that there's something, there are a lot of words I've connoted for the things I do. They are not out there in public, you understand, but those are principles I take very important. Like I told you before that I'm a baroque artist, I'm a painter. So again, it tells you of at once that I'm drawn to low key lighting as much as possible. No matter what's happening, I keep my lighting as low key as possible so I can have that tonal immensity. I call it a fearless tonal immensity, whereby you can actually have people and spaces and objects separated by the interplay of light and darkness. I like that a lot because, of course, I'm a fine artist, and that's all drawn from the influence of chiaroscuro, as introduced by Leonardo da Vinci and the rest of them. Again, I am a huge uh, preacher of less dialogue, especially if it's not necessary. Let everything else tell the story beyond the dialogue. So for most of my movies, everything else, it is when everything else cannot tell that part of the story as effectively as a dialogue. That's when the dialogue comes in. But let me go back to what people know me the best for, my lighting design. Uh, I've taken lighting design as an independent storytelling tool whereby you can actually mute the movie and the sound and watch the movie. And if you are someone who understands colors and lights, you will be able to tell what's going on in the movie because of the lighting design. You understand? And finally, the one thing again that has always stood me out from my very first movie is what I particularly call microscoped, you understand? So it's more like I pay attention to the things that are often unnoticeable things. I pay attention to tiny details that a lot of people overlook, but within those tiny details and tiny objects within
Strong
the scene,
messages.
you said?
Strong messages are.
Yeah, there are strong messages. So for instance, I'm talking to you now and this is a movie and there's this mic here and all of a sudden there's a chain of ants crawling up to this place and then they end up here.
Yes.
If that happens and then I'm able to use my macro lens, maybe a 30 macro lens, and I get that ant to be able to fill up my screen this way and it looks very big on the screen, all of a sudden that ant that was not noticeable, like you can see my fingertip now, or let me put my flash drive here. There are a lot of things about this flash drive that you will not notice. You might not even notice it's broken just looking at it at the table.
Yes.
But when it comes this close, the fact that it's broken, and let me even do on the spot now, let me tell a story with this thing I'm saying now. So if I was going to tell a story about a woman who is going through a divorce and she's broken-hearted again, let me tell you how I might use this as part of my subtext in telling the story. But then it will not be an effective subtext if I don't go extreme close up to show the detail of this flash drive. So the lady sits in front of her computer, she's about to send a message, and then she brings out her flash drive from her
Okay.
purse. And I have an extreme close up shot of the flash drive going into the USB port, and I see that it is broken. I have actually directly, in a visual manner, related the brokenness of
Of course.
this to the brokenness of her soul and
Yes.
her spirit at the same time. But again, that information and that detail will skip so many people. You
Yes.
get what I'm trying to say? But again, you don't make, as a surrealist, as an artistic filmmaker, you don't make movies for everybody. You make movies for the select few who are followers of what you do and who will take out time to understand the painstaking details you've put into every scene as a filmmaker.
And that could actually work in a setup. That could actually be a setup where it is resolved somewhere, where the broken
Exactly.
flash drive becomes relevant to either resolve
Exactly.
the story or create
It,
something.
it exactly. So it becomes a pivotal point in your story arc. You get what I'm trying to say, you know. And if we go back to the previous one about ants coming in here, so assuming she was going to be having this interview with someone, and then I put ants trailing this way here, and they converge here and all that close to the person's mouth. As a surrealist, I'm already thinking, you know what, this guy is uttering sweet words to this lady, so perhaps there have to be an affection shift from
You know,
whoever broke her heart to this person who she's talking to right
I never
now.
thought of sweetness. You just went to sweetness, and I remember that art is associated with sugar.
Exactly. So again, it's personally, I'm a visual storyteller. So for me, every little object is important to my storytelling. Every little, the crack on the wall, the scratch on my mouse pad, the scratch on the tab of my computer. I'm looking at my tabs on my keyboard now, and there's X, Y, Z, and there's the hash and all that. Every little thing, if I can just manage to get close to the details on every little thing, it offers me a new world of expandability of storytelling. And a lot of people shy away from that. So again, when people do it, when people like me do it, it never goes unnoticed by those who appreciate those things.
Well, I have noticed it, and
Yeah.
so I enjoyed watching your movies, Behind the Wheels, Common
Mm.
Man, Thousand Trails, Coat of Arm. The one that really struck me was Coat of Arm. You know why it
Yeah.
struck me? It struck
Mm.
me that the future generation will invariably need to reconcile the differences in order for them to live together.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, you know what happened to me some days back? I was on Twitter and then I saw this very long thread. I didn't know anything about it. I'm hardly on Twitter. You know how crazy Twitter can be. So I'm always on LinkedIn or Instagram, but Twitter I'm not a Twitter fan. But I just stopped in there and I was just checking. Okay, let me see my messages, and I saw someone tagged me somewhere and she said, "Oh, this thread reminds me of Stanley Ohikhuare's coat of harm." And I was, okay, what's this thread about? And I started reading it, and it was all about religious intolerance and tribal killings all across Nigeria. And on that thread, it just wouldn't end. There were mostly